All right, guys, we are live. I have with me here Anne Hay and Danny Shader, both from PayNearMe. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. Maybe, Danny, I'll direct this question to you. Do you want to give the listeners and myself a little background on how you, maybe even extending past PayNearMe if you'd like to, but how you sort of ended up working at PayNearMe and how you ended up starting the company? If there's particular bullet points, I looked at your background and it's quite extensive with the different companies you've worked at. So maybe just kick us off with PayNearMe, how you started the company and what the company does, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I started the company originally as something called Quedit back in 2009. The idea was it was the world's first intentionally unreliable payment system. And this was back in the day when Farmville was happening and all that, and there were these virtual goods being sold that had no marginal cost. And so we had this insight that we would grant virtual credit for virtual goods since the risk of default was zero, right? I mean, if you defaulted on something that had no value, so the idea was, to sort of extend credit to people, and then they could repay promises to pay, and they'd get more credit. And anyhow, really clever idea. It had absolutely no market acceptance, but it was a really clever idea. But part of the idea of doing that was that the previous business I'd run called Good Technology, we had raised $250 million of capital for that business, and it was incredibly complicated. Really hard thing to execute. It ended up working out very well, but it was a real challenge. And so when that was done and we sold that to Motorola, and then I decided to go the next thing, I want to do something really simple. So the idea was Quedit. By the way, here we are now later, having raised $100+ million of capital in a business that makes that looks super simple. Quedit, which was super simple, ended up turning into something that was incredibly complicated, much more complicated than the thing that I was trying to get away from doing. So there you go.
It was when you say complicated, is it complicated in a business model sense, or was it just technically hard?
Yes, and then you left out the regulatory part and the business development part.
Yeah.
So PayNearMe, what PayNearMe does is we're a payment experience management company. So we take over everything related to the interactions that our customers, which are businesses and government agencies, have with their customers who are consumers around payment. So we're handling all the forms of tender, so the cash, the ACH, the cards, the Apple Pay, the Google Pay, et cetera, through what are called payment channels are. So the web, the IVR, the mobile, the customer service rep, et cetera. And then all the engagement systems, the reminders, the scheduling of payments, the future payments, all of that stuff. So that's all managed by us with all the business logic around that. So when you think about what's involved in that, there's all of the technology to do that. It's a fairly significant enterprise software challenge. There's all of the integrations we have to do. So we're integrated into store POSs. We can talk about how we handle cash. We're integrated into the banking system. We're integrated into Apple Pay and Google Pay and all these other things. We have then a very extensive stack of software that allows ourselves to connect all these different business systems that our customers are running to allow us to extract information and post payments. We're regulated as a money transmitter in 50 states. We have a fairly healthy gambling business, so we're regulated as a gambling payments provider in a bunch of states. It's really complicated. And everything has to work perfectly.
Wow.
By the way, and everything has to work perfectly all the time, 24/7. Other than that, it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the nature of payments, is that there's no bugs, are just extremely difficult to deal with.
You say that, and yet one of the incumbents that we compete with, I mean, frankly, one of the reasons we exist is because they have a hard time keeping their systems up. So that gives us the entree to then present what we do, and their lack of reliability allows us to use the reliability card to then pitch this entire system, and people go, wow, I didn't even know I could get something to do that for me. So, yep.
Would you guys be on the level of like Authorize.net, or is it a level above that?
No, we're playing above that. In fact, we are not. We should talk separately about cash, but generally speaking, we're insourcing the processing. So we are all the value added above the processing through the customer interaction. So, a typical customer for us might be a lender. The payment portal that you're interacting with or the mobile experience is ours. The integration into Apple Pay, if you want to use that method from us, is ours. When you're calling the IVR, it's us. when the customer service rep is interacting with you and changing the pricing. That's us. And then importantly, let's talk about cash for a second. And by the way, if you want to pay that auto loan with cash, you're running through the thing we do process ourselves, which is we run our own unique proprietary only in the world, real-time electronic cash transaction network. So we have integrations in the point of sale terminals at over 26,000 retail stores. So all the 7-Elevens, CVS, Family Dollar, HCAS Express, Casey's General Store, and others coming. Those POS systems are integrated into our switch. Our switch is then connected to their loan management system, property management system, gaming operator system, et cetera, so that when a barcode that's issued by our system is carried by a consumer to a store, when the POS operator, when the clerk scans the barcode and you hand over your cash, in real time, your payment is credited by that business system that our customer is running. So
that's
it turns
interesting.
cash into a real-time electronic tender. Now, by the way, that's what we started with, but then we extended it to all these other tender types. So in fact, we jokingly say we're the only company in the world that ever referred to credit cards and things like that as alternative tender types, because we started as a very cash-centric model. But we realized that, and we can, it depends how geeky you want to get, but there's something kind of cool about the through a very lucky accident, the things we had to do to process cash, when you then apply them to other forms of tender, introduce a whole new level of reliability to the payment process. And that turns out to be really useful in every segment. But by the way, if you want to go there, in gaming in particular. And so the integration we did for cash, we then extended for all these other tender types.
So as a little background on my side, so the first startup I did was called Zing Checkout, and it was a point of sale system for apparel stores specifically, and then branched out. We ended up selling the company to Big Commerce, but I got very familiar with point of sale integrations and just kind of like behind the scenes what goes on in point of sale.
Yeah.
And so just so I understand, so when you go into a store with a QR code that was probably printed out or on your phone,
and it's not necessarily a QR code. In our cases, most cases, it's not a QR code, because most of these POSs that's not what they're scanning. But nonetheless, yes, a barcode, yes.
Mm-hmm. And does it have to work? Does it work where you guys would own a central database, and then all the point of sale systems would like hit it with the API and say, does this code exist? Kind of like the way gift cards work.
Yeah. So what's happening is the POS thinks we are another gift card network. So the POS thinks we are Incom or Blackhawk. In fact, sometimes we are Incom or Blackhawk or Green Dot. Sometimes we're running what you think of as the activation over that card network. So what's typically happening is there's a SKU in the item master. We're really getting geeky, but there's a SKU in the item master associated.
I know, I love it.
Associated with a pricing plan, and that's concatenated with a bin range and a transaction ID. And so when you're scanning, it's looking up that SKU, said, oh, this should be a $3.99 convenience fee split the following way, and we're going to route, but it's for a load, not for a tender, and we're going to route it to PayNearMe through PayNearMe's bin, which may run over Incom or Blackhawk or our own connection, comes to us. We then get the transaction ID and an amount. We say, oh, this store in this location at this time is trying to accept $253.85 for this transaction ID. Okay, so far we're on what I call the commodity side of the network, which is the activation. Now comes all the years and years of development. Oh, okay. That we're looking up that ID. That's a property management rent payment for Appfolio. There's a real-time connection to Appfolio on behalf of which is a property management system, on behalf of one of their property managers saying, hey, we're trying to accept $253 of rent for this account. And in the Appfolio system, Appfolio is saying, yep, we're willing to accept that because that's a really good tenant. Or no, we're not. That guy's in eviction. We don't want his money. It says yes. Then we're checking, oh, okay. Are all the compliance conditions met? Is this amount acceptable? Is it okay to accept it for this kind of transaction in this location where that POS is locating? Yes. Bing, signal to the POS, open the cash drawer, accept the payment. Cash drawer pops. Appfolio now records that transaction is done. There's now a receivable from us. We have a receivable from, say, 7-Eleven. We're then settling from 7-Eleven into our bank account, and from bank account to Appfolio, and the guy's rent's paid. But That's super complicated. What does it feel like to the consumer? I walked in with my phone. They scanned it at 1 o'clock in the morning. They scanned my phone. I gave them my cash. I got a receipt printed out that said, I've paid my rent. The rent's done. It's not reversible. It's 100% guaranteed good funds. And I'm for the property manager, and I'm off the hook, and off I go. As opposed to, I go to a Western Union or MoneyGram agent. I wait in line. I fill out a form. I give them money. They charge me an upcharge if I want to get the money there sooner. The property manager has no idea the money's coming until it shows up. It shows up. By the way, they may not have wanted the money because maybe I was in eviction or I was in foreclosure or I whatever it is. And so it's just a much better approach. It's faster, better, cheaper for a problem that people have every day. But then put that in context to PayNearMe.
Wow, thanks for going down the rabbit hole with me on that.
That's just the cash, right?
Yeah.
That same UI that presented you the barcode. When you let's say you're going to pay this guy this lender back, you get a choice. Do you want to pay with cash? Okay, you'll do that. If you want to pay with card, then we'll collect your card credentials, tokenize it, and by the way, hide all those credentials from the customer service so that they can have their customer service agents working at home while you're entering this information on your phone where you are, which is a big plus during COVID, or maybe your ACH or whatever. Now we're going to store all those credentials. We're going to let you choose when you want to pay, future pay, scheduled pay, et cetera. And then we're going to let you swap tender types because, by the way, people who pay in cash this month may want to pay with ACH next month, may want to pay with debit, may want to pay with Apple Pay, and they switch around. And we make all of this. This is all handled in our system, so it's all transparent with respect to the ultimate merchant who's the beneficiary of the payment. Like I said, it's a piece of cake.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty simple. So where's the complicated part?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I built a point of sale system, and I also started a crypto gift card exchange network called Redeem. So everything you said makes sense to me. But I wonder.
For people out there listening to this, I hope you understand what I'm talking about. But the actually, from the business perspective, is they can get paid through any tender type, through any engagement model, through any channel. It all works. If one form of payment doesn't work, we can swap to another one. It's all done transparently. And why does all this matter? Because our customers are not the people who are buying Stripe and Braintree and building their own system. Our customers are the vast majority of businesses and government agencies who don't have enough development resources to handle all the stuff they need to handle in their core. So why are they rebuilding a payment system when we've got the best user experience and the best analytics and the best settlement and the best in the world, combining all the stuff for these consumers? It's an enterprise software play for a complicated, sticky, highly regulated problem they don't want to mess with. And the consequence of this is we drive more consumers to customer service. We reduce their cost of, their total systems cost of payments, and we do it with technology.
Yeah. No, you guys are tackling a super complicated problem. And I think I like that you point out the regulatory thing.
It's 13 years of work. Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me cover a couple of the high level things. So you started it 13 years ago. You were the founder. Where's the company at now, either in terms of revenue, employees, money raised, however you can talk about the traction?
Well, why don't we say? I think we can talk about this. We're processing, closing in on $5 billion a year of payments. We're growing, very, very quickly. We're, well north of 100 employees and actually recruiting a lot of people right now. The business is accelerating, so we're actually growing faster as we get bigger. So that's, so it's, it's now it's a meaningful, sizable thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And you, back in 2009, when you started this, was this a spin-off from Quedit?
No. Okay, so what happened was literally the idea was after Good Technology, which was my previous business, that was what I thought was the most complicated thing I'd ever done. I wanted to do something really simple. And so there was this, we had this wacky idea that was inspired. Another guy had this crazy idea for social payments. We took it and ran with it, turned it into Quedit. Literally, by the way, just as another story, there's a guy named Steve Capps who was on the original Mac development team as an Apple fellow, also a Microsoft fellow. He was one of the first guys we recruited, super smart guy. And I showed him my PowerPoint mock-ups of this thing, of Quedit. And he's like, oh, it's a joke to this day. Oh, it's just 10 screens. That 10 screens is now everything I just described to you. But anyway, we ended up creating Quedit. Like, it was intellectually interested, but literally nobody cared. But the thing that the lucky accident was that I knew somebody who knew somebody at 7-Eleven, and I said, we're doing this game payments thing, and we want a place where people can repay their promises. And 7-Eleven said, yeah, let's do that. Let's be that place, because they had a strong gift card business, and they were making a strategic play to increase their gift card business, and this looked like an adjunct to that. And it was, it was proprietary, it was a product that you weren't going to get everywhere else, and they agreed to do this.
Yeah.
So then when we went out pitching, oh, by the way, and just aside, I thought, this went so easily with 7-Eleven. Every retailer we approach is going to say yes to this. And of course, we approached other retailers and like, we're not opening our POS to you. Go away. Like, they thought we were crazy. But 7-Eleven had the vision and the foresight and the trust to let us do this. Then we went out and pitched it to people, and people were like, well, I don't care about that promise thing, but that cash thing at 7-Eleven, that's what we do in Japan. You're saying we can do that here? I'm like, yeah. They go, great. So forget the promises thing. Let's just use you to like collect cash from consumers at 7-Eleven. That seems like a great idea. And that we named that became PayNearMe, and then we dropped the whole Quedit thing and off we ran with PayNearMe. And then what happened was customers, we were doing the cash, like, well, if you're doing my cash, why don't you take over my card payments? Well, if you're doing my card payments,
I see.
Why don't you take over my mobile and my IVR? Oh, if you're doing that, take over the customer service rep. Oh, by the way, can you do disbursements? Can you give me business rules? And, so it just starts growing on itself.
And can you just grow my business?
I'm sorry?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you just take over my entire business? So that's kind of interesting. So it ended up being a Trojan horse, the cash part of it, and the gaming just became not interested. The thing about that story that I'm most fascinated by, someone who started companies, is that you are a tiny little startup with no traction, and you get an enterprise partnership with 7-Eleven that actually works. There's so many times that I meet founders that have like, oh, we're in partnership with this big company, and it's just like, it's almost like a cliche to not even waste your time with that, because it almost never works out. But I guess you're the 1 in 100 million chance that it actually turns into something. When you're super small,
we drive, millions of store visits, pay millions of dollars of revenue shares. Like, it's a really good business for everybody. For a while, the way they described it was, I think it was useful, is when we had our connection to the POS, then we built all the software to allow us to connect all these other businesses and government agencies. And so our counterpart at 7-Eleven used to refer to us as the Y connector into the 7-Eleven POS. Right. So we could.
Was that, looking back at it now, was it like, I was going to ask you, so you're probably a 3-person, 4-person, a small team. When you go to 7-Eleven, they trust you to integrate to their point of sale. Was that as daunting in actuality as it sounds?
Look, this is like, so I've been doing a lot of startups in my life, and there are people who are visionaries who know exactly what they're going to do when they start out, and they actually end up doing that. It's never happened in my life. I've always started working on A, and then you then becomes A prime, and then becomes B, and B prime, and then C, and then you end up over here, and it had nothing to do with what you started with. And that has been the story of every business I've ever been involved with, and it's certainly the story of this one. Kudos to Mark Zuckerberg and those incredible people who can see the future that way. Mine is just like, there's a great line in business school, and the professor said, which was the best way to be in business is to be in business. And the idea is just have something you're selling to people and let them react to it, and then adjust, right? And so that's been the story of this company.
Yeah.
And look, I think the reason it worked with 7-Eleven at the time was there was a middle manager who's a great guy who now he's no longer 7-Eleven, but he remains a very close friend, who saw it. Like, in fairness, he saw what we could be long before we saw what we could be, because 7-Eleven had the experience of, they do this in Japan. This is how bills get paid in Japan. It's a totally different technological approach, but the user behavior of taking your cash in a barcode to the convenience store, is a very common modality for bill payment in Japan. 7-Eleven, I don't know if you know this, it's owned by a Japanese company. And so the guys in the US have a lot of experience with what happened in Japan. And so he saw it, and he's like, we can do this. And by the way, he was doing new merchandising for new stuff, and people were coming to him all the time with stuff. And he's like, I can't do it because I have no way to integrate. And he's like, but you guys could be my integration, right? So it's just one of those happy accidents. And then it started working, and success built on success. And it's, I think they're very happy with it. We're certainly a phenomenal partner over the years. We're super committed to, like, the best way for us to be successful is to have them get a lot of store visits and make a lot of money. And that's what we're focused on doing for them. On behalf of the customers, we're helping to get paid.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I always wonder why more we call them enterprise companies, just companies that are in multiple countries, and specifically countries in the East and West. There's so many things that we do differently. And as founders, I see things in the US and the Western world. Somehow they just, whether it's they come up on, news sources more or deal flow from investors, for whatever reason, it feels like there's not a clear window between what's happening, say, in China or Southeast Asia, maybe Southeast Asia more. China's kind of I wouldn't call it a black box, but it's just kind of gray as to what goes on. I was watching this, as a side note, I was watching this video that showed the different monetization strategies for the equivalent of YouTube in China. And it basically is like, you can, as a video maker on this platform, you can sell merchandise, you can have paid comments, you can have like guest speakers that pay to come on. There's like 17 different ways to monetize. Right. And it was showing that in the West, in America, it's like Shopify, or it's like Spotify, $14.99 a month. And then the Chinese version is like $3.99, and there's 16 ways you can pay them. And the more I thought about it, it makes sense to have multiple, to like bifurcate that more, to have more types of ways that the consumers can engage with the content producers. And Twitch ended up building something very similar to that, where there's like, 16 different ways that you can pay the producers on Twitch. And I wonder if you believe that to be true, where companies like 7-Eleven or even you guys that are in multiple countries, do you, over the course of the last 13 years, have you seen multiple opportunities where you're like, oh God, if I had the time, I would just start that company because this is what's working there?
Well, first of all, one correction, we're only operating in the US. And in fact, whereas
I didn't realize
I've done things very internationally. I think PayNearMe is a very North American business because we solve a set of problems that are fairly unique to North America and don't exist in other countries. And by the way, I want to make sure we come back and talk about the gaming business, because what's interesting to me is the people we're going to compete with in the US are people who've successfully solved problems in Europe. And my assertion is they're solving problems that don't matter in the US, and we're solving problems that matter in the US that don't matter in Europe. So we can come back to that for a second. But look, I think the best thing is when companies are innovative. And my old boss and mentor, a guy named Bill Campbell, used to say, innovation isn't just inventing something new. It's also just bringing in a good idea from someplace else. And so, right. In other words, if you've seen something work over there and you can twist it and bend it so it fits and improves your business, that's just as innovative as inventing something new out of a hat, because you fundamentally improve the core of what you're doing. So, I think there is a trap to think, well, it worked over there, it should work here. But there's also the trap of thinking it worked over there, it can't work here, right? And like everything, there's a yin and a yang, and you got to figure out the right balance.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, have there been other ideas that I've had? I'm not crazy enough, even though I've done these things my whole life, I've never had a good idea on my own. All of my original ideas have been terrible. But to my earlier point, they've all been props that got me into business, turning into something that was a good idea. But I'm not the guy, like I said, I'm not the visionary who figures this stuff out. Now, when we write the book about PayNearMe, I'm sure we'll come up with some great story like the Beanie Babies were for Pez, Pez Beanie Babies were for eBay, dating myself, on how it was all brilliant and we all figured it out in the beginning. But the reality is, no, it's just been a series of progress by Braille, just feeling our way through the.
I totally hear you there. I want to ask about this gaming situation because you seem excited about it. When you say gaming, are you describing?
I'm talking gambling.
I'm going to a casino and playing games.
Online gambling, right? Sportsbook, advanced deposit wagering.
Online.
Yeah, online. So we serve our two segments that we serve are things that look like bill payment, historically, things that lending, utilities, rent, things like that, and then talk about the US problem, we ended up completely by accident ending up with incumbency being integrated into essentially almost any company you can name in the United States that is in the online gambling world, we are processing payments for them. You name them, they're
wow.
The
only one that comes to mind is
possibly happen. The reason that possibly
is that like DraftKings?
I'm sorry, like that's the one that we don't do. So FanDuel and everybody else.
Oh, that's the only one I know.
So it's basically everybody but DraftKings. And well, what's the problem? Credit cards don't work reliably for gambling in the United States because either the network doesn't allow it or the card issuer doesn't allow it because it blows out their fraud models. So if you go to Amazon, you pay with a credit card, and you're a good card holder, your payment's going to be accepted, right? That's not an issue. If you go to FanDuel and you present a credit card and you're a good card holder, a debit card, or whatever your card, it may or may not be accepted, and it may have nothing to do with whether you're a good actor or not. That's a very American problem. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what if you're on one of these online sites and you've gone through all the effort of acquiring a customer, doing all the KYC checks, making sure that they're a good actor, making sure they're not on the do not play list, making sure they're in the right geographic location. You've done everything to line them up. They're motivated to play. You've spent all that money to get them to that point. They're ready. They're in good financial condition. They're ready to go, and you can't take their payment. What do? Well, pre-us, you let them go. But what about with us? Let's present them with the option to pay with cash.
Oh.
And so cash became, from the cash network, it became the basis for us to get integrated into everybody. Anybody who's operating, any new operator, anybody opening in a new state, because as you may know, these states are now increasingly, as a result of some Supreme Court decisions a couple of years ago, they're opening up all these. It's no longer illegal at the federal level to do some of the stuff. So states are choosing to open up. The players, these operators are moving into new states. They all call us. We integrate all of them. And at the same time that's happened, we've migrated, as I said from before, from doing cash to doing all forms of tender. So there's this land grab going right now on in the gambling world, right? As all these people are expanding, saying, who's going to become the payment processors? Well, who are the viable people for that? They're the guys who've historically done card processing in that world. There's us with the incumbency from cash expanding into electronic payments. And there are the gateway providers who came over from Europe. Now, what's the European gaming problem? The European gaming problem is I want to accept payments from multiple countries in different countries. I want an aggregation of multiple payment types. So, and I want to do it with the least amount of work. So what's the right business solution? You build a gateway product that presents all these different forms of tender, but they're all operating on the premise that if you present good funds, you're going to get approved. So the gateway model looks just like the commerce model in the US, which is you just kind of do a real-time connection between the operator system and the gaming payment system. And you say, here's this payment, I want to collect it. And they present the payment and the consumer tenders payment, and it works and you fund it back. No problem, right? So really valuable to be a aggregator of payment methods in Europe across multiple markets. What's the US problem? It's not multiple markets. It's one market, but the primary form of tender is not reliable. So what do you need? You need a system where you don't have a transaction-centric model of the operator assumes that the gateway is going to get a good payment. You need a system where the operator assumes the payment may or may not get a good form of payment. Well, what does that look like?
Right.
That looks a lot like issuing a barcode to somebody who may or may not go to the store with cash to pay for it. So our system is inherently asynchronous and built on the premise of non-reliability of follow-through. So when we've integrated cash and now we integrate all these payment types, we can, using a account-centric model or a customer-centric model instead of a transaction-centric model, say, okay, customer XYZ123, who we don't have, he's just an identifier in our system, right? Wants to add funds. Present him his card. If that fails, gracefully present him something else. Gracefully present him something else. Eventually collect his cash if you have to. Whatever good form of tender you've got, once you've got it, send that back into the system so the system can process the payment, as opposed to register. I'm going to try to pay with the card, failed. Oh, bummer. Start over again. Start different UI. Let me try a different form. Oh, bummer, failed. Oh, right. So this thing, my experience in life, happy accident. We designed the cash thing to solve the problem of paying your bills and doing this other stuff. It turns out to solve this problem in gaming, it turns out to be super extensible and frankly is the best technological approach to solving the unreliable payments problem in the US for gaming. And so we think we are fundamentally advantaged vis-a-vis the gateway model. Now, by the way, if we went to Europe, we'd fall on our face because we don't solve the European problem. We solve the American problem.
Oh, right.
Does that make sense?
Right. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There are different problems for different spaces.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you. So I love the way you describe it. Of at every time that the payment fails, offer them a different type of payment, and you just go down. You probably go right down the list, and they say, let it be the customer's decision to not pay if they don't want to pay. But ultimately, don't let the company be the bottleneck.
Oh, and particularly, and think about how much money got spent by the operator to acquire that consumer in a competitive market and get them through all the screens and get them authenticated. And like, they're motivated. Everybody's motivated. And like,
yeah. No, as a customer, that's the worst feeling. Like, you actually go from having an indifferent attitude toward the company to like, I freaking hate this company because they wasted all my time to get here. And now it's like, and the customer has no idea that the reason that I can't use my card is not because of the company. It's some, like you said, fraud model of the credit card companies behind the scenes. Is the reason why it's lower, maybe this is wrong, but is it lower risk to use cash in person because there's no risk of a credit card chargeback?
Cash has no, one of the skills we had to develop when we migrated from doing just cash to processing other forms of tender was dealing with fraud and chargebacks, right? Because when we take cash at the register, it's 100% guaranteed good funds. That's not true, for example, for processing ACH or other forms of payment. So we had to develop, the muscles that the payments, the traditional payments people are very good at historically, right? Which is how do you handle all that?
Right.
But we have a fundamental architectural integration that is different. The way we integrate with the properties is fundamentally different than how the card guys integrate. We're adding cards in our system where we're the merchant, but we've got this loose asynchronous connection with the ultimate beneficiary. That's what allows us in our loop to have one user interface that's processing multiple forms of tender and gracefully managing the transition between the two of them.
Got it.
I'm sorry, between the end of them, not the two of them.
I imagine I want to ask you about two things. I don't know what order to ask you in, though. I'm curious about the whole world of money laundering and money transmitters. And all I know about money transmitters in every state is that it's quite an accomplishment to get that in all 50 states, and it's expensive, and there's a lot of things you have to do. I'm also interested in how crypto plays a role, or if it's just another gateway, it's no big deal for you guys. It's just another line item on the options for customers. Or do you see cryptocurrency playing a bigger role in your business, or just your world? I'll call it your world in general.
Okay, so curious. You want to do the crypto thing first?
Sure.
Okay, so technologically, yes, crypto is just another form of tender. Now, remember that ultimately all this stuff is flowing through the banking system. So will our bank partner accept it? Will our customer's bank partner accept it? Will their risk models accept it? Will the regulators for the category of business that we're in accept it? Does it break the KYC model of somebody in the chain? Like, remember I talked about this being complicated in the beginning? Like all those things have to line up, right? So we are a super regulated business processing billions of dollars, tracking every penny and knowing where it came from and where it went, or particularly where it went. We can't put any of that at risk. So we watch the crypto as tender thing with great interest. And we are actively working to do all the right stuff to be ready when it's the right time to do it. But we will make sure we do it in a way that makes sure that everybody in this ecosystem, this complicated ecosystem, is operating within the law, protected from risk, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that makes sense.
We just got to be very thoughtful. There's a whole separate question I could ask you about, which is, I'm really curious to see what happens to crypto as a form of tender as opposed to crypto as a store of value. Because if you think it's an appreciating store of value, why would you spend it? Right?
I think it's going to be multiple options. Like Bitcoin, they had the Bitcoin split or forked between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. So I think it kind of comes down to the software architecture, how much it costs to transact or send from one wallet to the other, and how mining works. So I think for sure there's going to be different types of currencies that you would use for different types of payments. Whether, because it's not even feasible to send like a penny of Bitcoin, or even sometimes like $1, because it'll just cost you more than the transaction in mining fees. So I think the consensus or the view now is Bitcoin as it is really a competitor to gold, and then maybe Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So look, our CTO and CISO is super deep in all this stuff and very impassioned. And he and I have very actively discussed this stuff. And my general bias is we have to be all over it, so that at the point we are actually solving a real business problem for somebody, we are ready to move.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. We have to be market driven, and we have to be driven by the market and constrained by safety and regulation. But look, Go ahead.
I was going to add to that. I think where you'll see the demand will be that clients, or I guess in your case, merchants, will want to offer this methods of crypto payment to attract customers who probably have crypto accumulating in their accounts, sure, and they want to just spend it instead of trading it back in and classifying it as gains.
And by the way, there are other things, there are other ways in which crypto technologies and blockchain can be useful to us. We're certainly interested in anything we can do to accelerate settlements between us and our customers. There are things that are interesting to us about moving balances around between different regulated state entities. And so there's a bunch of places that we are, really carefully watching and experimenting. Mm-hmm. But we will move thoughtfully, I would say.
Yeah. I want to ask you, for just changing gears a little bit. So you now have quite a large company going on. What advice would you give to your younger self, or just general thoughts about managing a company of that size? Is there specific tactics or strategies, methodologies maybe that you use to communicate either to investors or to the team? Or, things change when you get to that scale. You probably can't have a relationship with everyone. I'm curious how that's gone through. You've started and grown multiple companies now, gone through business school.
It's all about having executives who are really good managers. I'm not a very good manager, but I have executives who actually run. So philosophically, I don't run the company. The executives run the company. I raise money, I break ties, I communicate, I set values. And I may nudge for one direction or another. But if you start with the premise that I'm not a visionary and that we should be listening to the market and adjusting, then the right people to make the decisions on what we do are the people who actually run the company, who are the people who run the functions, who are closest to the action. So philosophically, that's how my staff works. Also, those people, they have all the people working for them, and so they're the ones who have to be really good managers. In fact, the people who work for me have to be good at managing me, right? So that's goal number one is, don't do what you're not good at, and I'm not good at that, so I don't do it. Right. And then
how do you?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh no, I was going to ask you, how do you deal with the situation where maybe you hire a manager that is an executive, and maybe she or he is not quite living up to your vision of them. They're sort of in that in-between state where they're like, they're kind of, you give them like a C+. Do you?
If I had an executive I thought was probably anything lower than an A-, I would figure out a way for that executive with dignity to find something else to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You ever read the book or hear about the book, was it? Is it Elephants Can Dance? I think it was. It was a
Teaching
story of
Elephants Dance, that was
IBM.
the book, what's
Yeah,
IBM, Lou Gershner wrote about IBM. Again, ruined my
yeah,
age.
yeah,
Yes. What about it?
yeah. I love that book because it talked about exactly what he did when he came into office there, which was that he asked every one of the managers in the team to give him a report and present it to the team about everything that was going on in the company. And it was like refreshing to hear how this works because I remember reading the book when I was like 22 years old and having no clue what would go on inside of a boardroom of a massive company like that. And it's not rocket science. It's just ways of communicating that align with what people are good at, and then working from the top down to communicate. I find business management kind of like more interesting. I think there's more to it than most people kind of brush it off, or a lot of people would brush it off and say it's just one of a million different business books. Are there people that you've looked to or learned a lot from or find inspiring that you've learned from in the business world?
Oh, well, for sure. Well, there's one particular guy, this guy I mentioned before, a guy named Bill Campbell, who sadly passed away a few years ago, who many people consider, one of the 3 or 4 greatest leaders in the Valley. So among other things that he did,
Yeah.
he was literally on the Apple board while he was sitting in every Google executive staff meeting. And he would go back and forth between those guys, and then he would meet with me and be coaching me on the side. And
Wow.
yeah, so this is a guy, they broke the mold with this guy. I think he's the greatest leader, business leader, and I mean leader in the real sense of leader that I've ever met or probably ever will meet. And his approach was entirely values centric, right? So he's one of these guys who could he believed in you more than you believed in yourself. And as a result, you would do great things. And he was as pure as the driven snow from a sort of morals, ethics, values perspective, and had no tolerance for any bullshit outside of that. And so people who he attracted and retained, people around him who all at some level were all incredibly different from one another. And yet, if at the end of the day, they were all super hardworking, bright, had unquestionable integrity, and had what I think he would have called character, but I think now they call grit, which is sort of this ability to stay with it. And if you think about it, there's lots of people you can think who are in one of those sets. The Venn diagram intersection of the center of the 4 of those things is pretty narrow. And so there would be people around him who were brilliant technologists, incredible athletes, incredible salespeople, incredible whatever, nerds like me, whatever. But those are the characteristics. They all cared, and they all cared about the same things. And we all sort of speak this Bill language to some extent. And by the way, 20 something years ago, when I was building Good Technology, the previous business I mentioned, Bill walked in and thought what I was doing as a manager was a shit show. And he called up a protege of his, a guy named Dave Kinzer. And unbeknownst to me, called Kinzer up and said, Shader's in there fucking this. Okay, I say that. Shader's in the screwing this thing up.
Yeah, you could say.
Okay, get in there. You got to help him. And Dave started working with me then. And by the way, to this day, sits in all of our exec staff meetings. So he is this sort of living embodiment of Bill's values, who plays a key fundamental role in our company of keeping us on the rails.
Huh. And are there specific things? Did you set a team culture rule book, or did he have specific tactics that were unusual? Or I imagine his charisma.
No, it's not. I mean, he's very charismatic, but it wasn't like you can't emulate the guy's charisma. You can none of us who've been influenced by Bill can be Bill. By the way, the Google guys wrote a book about him called The $1 Trillion Coach that came out.
Yeah.
So, and there's actually a great podcast series by a guy named Paul Martino, who with one of Bill's closest friends, Randy Commissar, did something called the No Bull podcast about Bill. That's awesome series of interviews about him. But no, it wasn't. And the reason I mention this, all of us aspire to be like Bill, but none of us is like Bill. But the values stuff is the same, right? So when I remember at one point saying to Bill, you've done so much for me, how can I ever repay you? And his response was, you can't. But you can teach my values to the next set of people and have them teach it to the next set of people. And by the way, he said, that's what Floyd Kwame did for me when I came, from Kodak to Silicon Valley at Apple. He ran sales and marketing at Apple, in the Mac era. And he's like, they did that for me. You're going to do it for these people. They're going to do it for their people. That's how you repay
me. I like that.
Yeah.
Pay it forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's pay it forward, right? Yeah. But look, there are so many people out there who will act really nice, but when push comes to shove, they're jerks. And Bill didn't. There was never a jerk level. Like, it was pure.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, I like that.
When the little devil voices are playing that might lead me to do the wrong thing, I was like, well, what would Bill do? Right? Well, he wouldn't do that. He'd shut that thing down. Do the right thing.
It's like a what would Jesus do question for business. I like that a lot. Yeah. Do you think there are people, I'm sure there are, but are there people now that you look at either in the public sphere, on public sphere is probably Twitter, different social media, that seem to be pushing out some similar values to that? Or would you direct people listening to follow any people? Or I know you mentioned the book, The $1 Trillion Coach.
Well, actually, I think the book is good, but the book is very good, but the book is very googly. It's a really analytical approach to a fundamentally qualitative thing. So it's part of the puzzle. I think the interviews that are on this No Bull podcast, I think, are particularly good. Particularly, I would listen to there are a few that are just incredible. There's one with like Dave Kinzer, the guy I mentioned who helps us out. There's an interview where it's actually a great. I will repeat a story that Kinzer tells in that interview that is incredibly powerful. Where so Bill ran this. He was head of sales and marketing at Apple, and then he was going to spin out this business called Claris back in the day, which was a Mac software company. Apple was going to take it, spin it out, and he recruited a bunch of people to go work with him. One of them was this guy Kinzer, who ran operations, and at one point Kinzer did something wrong, and it cost the company $125,000 or something. And he goes to tell Bill, I've made this terrible mistake. It's going to cost the company $125,000 or whatever. And Bill just looked at him and said, like, you're worth a shitload more to this company than $125,000.
Yeah. And he just spent $125,000 to teach him a lesson.
But he also, you think that generated loyalty and a desire to do the right thing? And do you think it made an impact on Dave for the rest of his life? Can you imagine somebody saying that to you? I mean, it's incredible. At least I found that very, very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I like it a lot. Where do you want to take PayNearMe? What do you want to do moving forward? Say in the next 5 years, are you trying to IPO the company, sell the company, just keep doing what you're doing and not think about that?
Well,
how do you think about that?
I want the company to get, I want it to be bigger and more meaningful. We're trying to build a durable business that will last. And so, I think you build the company and everything else takes care of itself. So we'll build the company and everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, I like that. Well, it was a real joy talking to you guys.
It was fun.
Danny. And we'll have to get you more involved in the next conversation.
Thanks, Sam.
I should mention, yeah. Danny, where can people reach you? People are inspired by the conversation or want to just follow more of your, I don't know if you're writing or speaking more publicly. I saw you did a couple interviews publicly. Are you on any of the social
webs?
I'm
not. I just tweet my political leanings, so that's not worth following. Certainly the PayNearMe Twitter account is good. And then I'm Danny at PayNearMe.com if anybody wants to reach out.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah. I think it's
right. Nice. And anything you guys are looking for now, whether it's hiring management, engineers, raising money?
There's lots of job postings, and we would love for people to take a look and come join us, assuming they have those values.
Awesome. All right, guys. This is a pleasure.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. All right. Take care.